Hi lovely, and welcome to this week's live. Now today we've got a slightly controversial topic: why you should stop trying to quit smoking. So if this is something you're struggling with at the moment, I'd love you to drop it in the comments. And honestly, this one's relevant to any addiction. It's just easy to talk about in the context of smoking. So the traditional approach here is to resist the craving like as much as you can. To replace it with like patches, nicotine patches or gum to help with that nicotine withdrawal. Feeling guilty every time that you have one and feeling like you've failed every time you have one. And just trying to distract yourself by doing other things like go for a walk or do the dishes or just do something else. So the reason why this doesn't work on its own, and I just want to highlight that these things are all like kind of valid and good strategies, but you can't just do those things. And the reason for that is that if it's just a habit, those things might work, but smoking is a coping mechanism for most people. So what we mean by a coping mechanism is it's a mechanism, a strategy that we use to help us cope with our emotions or a particular situation or things from the past. So typically most people, as much as it is a habit as well, and we just get into the routine of having one, before you eat, after you eat, before you go to the shops, when you come back from the shop. So it is a habitual thing, but it is also a coping mechanism for most people. So just explaining a little bit about how the brain works when it comes to addiction. So at the moment, if you are an avid smoker, you do it all the time, your brain has created this super highway from any situation, whether it's stress, being hungry, feeling anxious, being in a social situation, all of these different situations, the easiest thing to do for your brain is to go and have a cigarette because it's created this shortcut. It knows that that works. And there's nothing wrong with that. Your brain's just trying to do the thing that's most efficient really for your brain, instead of trying to analyze like a whole bunch of different things we can do to cope with a certain situation. We've got this one thing that we know is a quick fix, which the brain loves, works really well. And yeah, we might feel terrible afterwards or, all the other side effects, but they come afterwards. Whereas with nicotine, you get this really big hit and you just feel awesome, and then yeah, that's kind of where the brain goes to. So what we need to do instead is build up some other roads. So we've got this super highway to smoking, but we've got these tiny little paths that go off in other directions. So say we experience some stress, instead of going down the super highway, we start going down these little forest paths, lots of different ones, and these are all our new coping mechanisms that we try to bring in. So it might be things like sitting with your emotions for a moment and just really feeling what's in the body, breathing into it, holding space for it, not trying to push it out in any way, but just gradually releasing the tension inside through the breath. Also, another pathway might be bringing in some deep breathing exercises. Especially smokers really love breathing exercises because it's kind of similar to taking a drag of a cigarette. Other things might be like dancing or singing or other creative expression. Maybe another pathway is journaling and just writing down how you feel, like, God, I really want a cigarette and it's because of this, that and the other, and just letting that all out on paper. So my approach when I'm working with clients is, instead of saying, okay, let's try and resist having that cigarette or let's try and distract ourselves, is we start by saying, okay, you're allowed to smoke as much as you want, as much as you normally do, but each time before you have a cigarette, I want you to try a different coping mechanism. And that's not to say that you're not allowed to have the cigarette afterwards, you can still have it. But just try doing the breathing exercise first, or try journaling first, or try sitting with your emotions first, and then have the cigarette. Because otherwise what happens is we go on a mad, like, smoke as much as you can, and then, because you know that you're going to be told that you're not allowed to smoke anymore, and then there's just this constant, like, battle between whether we smoke or not. So, you're allowed to smoke, bring in the coping mechanism beforehand. And what you'll find is that every time you bring in that new coping mechanism, you're building up these tiny little forest paths, maybe into a little country road. So they're not quite a super highway yet, but you're building up these little country roads. And then you use these country roads more and more, and there's more traffic going down them. So it's like, maybe we should open up to, but I should have memorized all the types of roads before I did this. But maybe like a B road and then an A road, and then you can see where I'm going with this. Gradually, these new coping mechanisms become like a super highway in themselves. And the really cool thing about the way the brain works is it takes about 3 weeks to repeatedly build up these new neural connections, these new highways. And the less that we use our cigarette superhighway, that gradually, there's no traffic, or not as much traffic going down there anymore. So let's turn that into a B road or an A road and then down to a country road. And then gradually that becomes a little forest path. And to be honest with you, that forest path is probably always going to be there, but at least it's not a super highway anymore. So it becomes much more difficult to go down that forest path. So I hope you're with me here on the whole roads metaphor. Let me know if it's confusing at all, if you've got any questions, and welcome to whoever's watching. Thank you so much for joining. So let me see where we are here. So yeah, just going back to our traditional ways, this might seem like you're distracting yourself from having a cigarette. And in some ways you are. There is truth behind that. You are trying to do something else, a coping mechanism first, instead of having a cigarette. But the difference is that we're distracting ourselves from the cigarette instead of coming into our emotions. So we're not actually distracting ourselves from our emotions because we're taking some time to go down this new route, go down to the different paths and build them up. So as much as we're like kind of distracting from the cigarette, we're not distracting from our emotions. And that's the really key here, to build up the coping mechanisms for the emotions. Hi Heather, thank you so much for joining. Let me know if you've got any questions as we're going through. So yeah, and just to go back to the other traditional ways, there still is some resisting involved. Because of course the first step is to build up these other coping mechanisms, but it does get to a point then where you have to start resisting going down that old superhighway that's becoming a smaller road, which actually just makes it so much easier to resist. So instead of the focus being on trying not to smoke, it's on trying to go down other ways. Oh, I'm so glad that this is relevant to you, Heather. That's beautiful synchronicity. Oh, you're trying to quit smoking at the moment. Okay, this might really, really help. I'm glad to hear it. So yeah, we're talking all about developing coping mechanisms, as I'm sure you're aware. So I help clients, I hold them accountable to this new pathway, and I help them discover the best ones that are right for them, because one coping mechanism is not going to work for everyone. One person's poison is another person's food. So yeah, sometimes it's a bit of a process to work out which ones work for you, and you kind of need someone there to hold you accountable, whether that's a women's health coach like me, or just a friend, your partner, someone else who's trying to quit as well with you, maybe your counsellor. Whoever it is, it's just really helpful to have someone there cheering you on and encouraging you to, instead of just skipping the coping mechanism and going straight to a cigarette, having someone there to be like, hey, I know you really want that cigarette, you can definitely have it afterwards, but why don't we try having a little dance around the kitchen first? Or why don't we just sit and breathe together for a moment? Or obviously someone's not going to be there every single time. They even know that you're checking in with someone on a weekly basis and letting them know how you got on. And feeling like less of a failure when you have the cigarette, because that feeling of shame and disappointment in yourself is only going to make you want to have a cigarette even more to cope with those emotions. So yeah, I hope that's clear. Let me know, especially Heather, if you've got any questions about this, and please reach out to me if you'd like some support and you feel like you'd like to work with me one-to-one on this. I love helping people with this because it's something that I struggled with for ages. And when I finally put it behind me, it was like freedom. It was the best feeling in the world. So yeah, smoking is challenging, and yeah, sometimes, you know, it can feel like you're being rewarded by quitting for doing something that normal people do, but it is really difficult, and you should reward yourself for even trying to quit. And I want to make that message really clear, like even just having the awareness to know that this isn't what I want to be doing and I'd rather be doing something else. That's really beautiful and awesome. So congratulations for trying to quit, Heather, and I'm here cheering you on, supporting you. That resonates with me so much because I go hard the first month, then mess up, and I've quit for years at a time and always go back. Yeah, no, this is the thing. I did the exact same thing. Don't worry about it. And so many people do. We go and we come back and we just try really hard and use our willpower, and then it happens again. And you just can't machine your way through this one. You really have to develop this foundation, really, of living well with other coping mechanisms. So yeah, that's it from me. And as I said, reach out if you'd like to hear anything more about this or any support. And I will be jumping on probably an hour after this next week. We started early today because I've got some things to do today. But yeah, I'll be talking next week, and I'm not too sure what next month's topic is going to be. I'm still thinking about it, but I will let you know when I know. Alrighty, I'll see you next week. Sending lots of love.